Hello, chat. Hello, everybody. Tonight it is Wednesday night, and tonight we are buddy. Tonight we are reclaiming our spot as the #1 Scrat streamer on Twitch. But we're gonna be doing something a little different. We're not gonna be streaming Scrat's Nutty Adventure. Instead, we are gonna be streaming some fan fiction. We are going to be searching every corner of the internet for some fan fiction about Scrat, for Scrat, everything about Scrat. I got a little Scrat right up here. It's great. We're gonna be known as Scrat fan #1 by the end of this. This was like such a random idea I had. It's like, man, it'll be funny. What if I just read fan fiction on stream? How fucking stupid would that be? I realized, like, I probably should have some music going. I can get some of this, right? I probably should have some music going, shouldn't I? I wonder if there's, like, an Ice Age playlist that we can use. Let's see. This is, like, totally not kosher, right? But this is, like... This is the no rules fucking stream tonight. We're going on YouTube. We're going to find some music that we're probably going to get banned for. Let's see. Ice Age playlist. I don't know what kind of music. Okay, awesome Ice Age songs. How am I going to play this? Let's see. Desktop audio on. Well, shit. It's not gonna work, is it? Well, fuck me. Man, I gotta get a better setup. If I wasn't streaming my audio, like, through my desktop, I think this is not gonna work. So fuck it. We're just gonna podcast it up. It's gonna be like a podcast, and we're just gonna go. All right. So I have not vented any of these. I have not even read this. I just pulled this up. I don't have a list of things to read. It's literally just gonna be like me on Google searching for Scrat fanfic. So here we go. This is on fanfiction.net, which is where I imagine a lot of these are going to be posted. And this was posted August 4th, 2007. It's almost 4,000 words. And it's by Golden Puan. Golden Puan. What happened if Scrat got a love interest? Well, here's your answer. But how can Scrat interact with a girl Scrat when he can't talk and has a powerful acorn obsession? Read to find out. Just remember, not all Scrats are the same. Alright, here we go. This is Love a Scrat by Golden Puan. Let's see if I can get can I get my Twitch chat, like... Chat, I want to have you, like, on screen. But I don't know if I can make it work. I don't know if I can make that work. Let's see. I can do this, right? This is all set up that I should have done beforehand. But that's just how it be. That is just how it be. I'm on a quest to lose as many followers as I can. That's why I'm doing this. It's like a challenge. It's the lose followers challenge. All right. Love a Scrat. All Ice Age characters belong to their Blue Sky Studios and 20th Century Fox. All other characters belong to me. It was spring, and Scrat was trotting through a green field in search of nuts. It was midday, and Scrat hadn't eaten, yet he remained confident because for once, nothing bad had happened to him that day. Suddenly, a dainty squirrel with saber teeth came out of some bushes. She held. Okay, so, like, there's plenty of grammatical mistakes and typos here, and I'm going to read it the way that it is. So I'm not just stupid. It's just the way that this was written. She held a nut that she presented to Scrat as she ran up to him. Scrat gasped and squeaked with joy. He gobbled down the nut as fast as he could, but after that he stopped. No one had ever given him a nut. Something or someone was always taking them away. Just then the female scampered off into the bushes from whence she came. Hoping for more nuts and not having any Girl Scrat experience, he followed after her. When he stopped and found her, she climbed a tree, grabbed an acorn from it, and made a graceful landing, nut in the palm of her little clawed hand. Scrat made a desperate run down, retrieved the female Scrat's nut, but got punched in the face and then stepped on. He squeaked and continued to try to steal her nut, getting pummeled each time. Finally, she grabbed him by the neck and held him against a tree. Scrat was confused. He tried to struggle, but then the female squirrel pointed herself and squeaked. Highly pitched, very cute. Etwa. It took a moment to register, but Scrat realized that she was saying her name. She loosened her grip on him and he squeaked back. His name, in his best pronunciation, Scrat. She tightened her grip on him again and ate her acorn in front of him, to his struggling horror. He tried to tackle her for eating what he claimed was his nut, even though it was hers, and she chased him with vigor and determination to the edge of a slippery iced cliff. Parentheses, there's still ice in spring since it's the Ice Age. Close parentheses. Very important context there. Even though he was a squirrel and was great with clinging to things, the ice was extremely slippery. And with the combined attack force of Etwa, he fell down the cliff into a partially frozen river. He took a look up at her from the icy water in the river below, and saw her tap her paws together, satisfied. Then she left. Now Scrat realized that her nuts were hers, and any messing with her would mean dire consequences as he struggled in the icy water for what felt like an eternity, as his greedy, nut-stealing punishment. He hoped he would get out alive, and frankly, never run into her again. What do you think? Scrat's had a rocky start to getting a female love interest. Scrat. Read and review. Okay. Is there more? That was chapter 1. Okay, here's chapter 2. This is chapter 2. Oh boy. Chapter 1 was slightly horny. I have to admit, chapter 1 was just a little horny. Okay. Love a Scrat, chapter 2. Scrat eventually got out of the icy water, shivering from its cold. The next day, Scrat was traveling through another field when he spotted 2 walnuts, a Scrat delicacy, half buried in the ground. He gasped and squeaked in delight. He ran to grab them both, but was tackled and held with a firm grasp to a rock by someone. It was Etwa. He whimpered because now he was holding both nuts. And because of the overwhelming tightness around his body from her grasping him. Then she handed him 1 walnut, released him from her hard grasp, and started to eat her own nut. Scrat almost made a dash to steal her nut, but Etwa made a fist with her paw and gave Scrat a menacing glare. Scrat cowered and trotted off. After a short time sniffing the field, Scrat spotted a huge tree full of acorns. He stopped for a second to admire his findings. Then he made up his mind to get all the nuts he could from the tree before could stop him. I'm reading it verbatim, chat. I'm reading it verbatim. He made a mad dash for the tree. He was about to put his clawed paw on the first nut. Then a dull orange blur knocked him out of the tree, or so he thought. It was Etwa again. She had caught him in the tree and carried him to its mere top. She had a strong grip on his torso. He grunted, groaned, and gasped for breath as he was squeezed so hard he felt like his guts might fall off. Sidebar, if you've seen Ice Age 1, when the glaciers squeeze Scrat, you probably know what I mean. Everybody remembers that part in Ice Age 1. It's like that. He squeaked and struggled uncontrollably until Etwa pointed sternly with a claw to a slightly smaller tree in the distance with noticeable acorns on it. The female squirrel gave Scrat a final glare and released him. Recovering immediately, filled with eagerness to match nothing else, he hustled to the tree. However, no sooner than he was in the tree than he began to think. Scrat was finally getting pretty easy nuts. No one had ever given him an acorn before, let alone a whole tree. Scrat began to feel like Etwa wasn't half bad. Sure, she had caused him agony and nearly made him lose his life when she threw him off into a half-frozen river, but Scrat was used to it. Everything and everyone kept him from his nuts, the thing in life he desired more than anything else. But now, someone had actually shared with him and offered him an acorn tree. It had enough acorns to last at least a month, and would be growing more soon, and would be. He was also even beginning to learn about sharing, which he still didn't like. Then another thought struck Scrat. He had never had a place to call home. Sure, he had ran into other acorn trees, but something disastrous always happened to them if he stayed by them long enough. For some reason, being given a tree by someone who looked like she had owned one for a long time gave him a sort of assurance and a thought of calling the gift home. Scrat decided to stick around long enough for a while, as long as no catastrophe happened that destroyed his tree. Then came the thought that someone might actually care for him. Following that train of mind, Scrat was left with feelings he didn't understand. Some about Etwa, and some about his home. Just as Scrat was finally feeling satisfied about some things in life, he was suddenly knocked out of his trance and almost out of his tree from the shock of something or someone making a thunderous trumpet sound. Who made the trumpet? Was it Etwa? Was it someone or that could destroy Scrat's newly found home? Was it the sound made by the start of a natural catastrophe? Find out in the next chapter. Okay? I'm hooked. Chat, I'm hooked. How many chapters are there? Ooh, 6 chapters. Chapter 3 is called... What is chapter 3 called? Honey, I Squished the Scrat? Question mark? Okay, here's chapter 3. Scrat fell from the tree as a huge trunk extended into it, picking off a branch. Then the stranger ate the branch, nuts and all. Scrat screamed and tried to attack the mammoth, who bellowed, annoyed, wondering why a squirrel would be attacking it. Then, as Scrat got more desperate and tried to tug at its legs as it resumed eating, the mammoth stepped on him by accident. Suddenly, a female squirrel appeared, sitting casually on a branch. By now, another mammoth, to Scrat's horror, a saber, 2 possums, and a sloth had come to check out the wild scene. The sloth mumbled something quietly to the saber. Quote, "I think you stepped on someone," end quote, a kind female voice said. The first mammoth, the one that had stepped on Scrat, looked puzzled, turned to the other mammoth. Unfortunately, Scrat got stepped on again as the mammoth moved. I didn't say anything, the female mammoth admitted. By now, the sloth was searching high and low to where squeaks of pain and the voice had come from. The voice came again, this time clearly by the female squirrel as she jumped onto the mammoth's tusk. Move! You stepped on someone! The mammoth moved. Now Scrat got a clear view and could see it was the mammoth by the name of Manny that had stepped on him. Sid, Diego, and 3 other animals he didn't recognize were next to him. Even more shockingly, the squirrel was Etwa, and she had been talking. Scrat got up dizzy and shook himself. Then he ran around frantically, grabbing for fallen nuts like a lunatic, while the herd and Etwa were talking. I'm very sorry for stepping on your friend and, Manny said to Etwa, and attempting to say to the still running Scrat as he glanced over at him. No problem, Etwa replied, scampering off. I'm sorry about standing, Manny tried again. Manny ended up looking very embarrassed, and the rest of the herd looked confused. Just then, Scrat stopped running, his claws so full of nut that he had started dropping them. He glanced over at the odd herd that seemed to want an explanation for him since Etwa had left. Scrat suddenly felt very angry at Manny for destroying part of his tree, and all of the herd for wondering what was going on when he was clearly the one that had suffered by losing nuts. Scrat made a karate yell and did a pose, but did not attack since he knew he was no match for any of these animals, besides maybe the sloth. The herd continued staring at him, this time some of the confusion on their faces turning to bewilderment. Scrat picked up a rock and hit Sid right on the nose. Diego and the possums laughed, but then Scrat started flinging many at once. The possums started to dash to try to join in, but Ellie stopped them, and the herd trudged off. Finally getting the point through their questions remained unanswered. Why could one Scrat talk while another doesn't? What is Etwa doing with Scrat, and why didn't she defend him? What will happen next? Will these questions ever be answered? Honey, I squished the Scrat. Chat, this is riveting. Try to tell me that you're not entertained by this. I dare you. Yay, another chapter. It's only been 2 years. Holy shit. This is a long-running piece of work here. Okay, chapter 4. One more makes 3. The tree was ruined. Absolutely ruined. When the mammoth had eaten from it, he destroyed many of its branches. Not to mention a deep gash in the trunk that practically split in 2 where the mammoth had sharpened its tusks. The tree would need a long time to recover and would not grow any acorns for months, or even die. But what was worse, acorns lay on the ground in the dirt. Though there were more in the tree, the thought of his acorns lying there in the cold, harsh earth filled him with sadness. And what's more, the tree would not likely make it. Scrat began to gather the fallen acorns in his paws and think of a way to fix his tree when chirping and bickering caught his attention. Scrat's jaw dropped when he saw that Etwa was fighting with another female squirrel. But this was no ordinary female squirrel. When the fight calmed down enough for him to get a look at her, Scrat practically fainted in awe and delight. Her eyes were a light blue, rimmed by long black lashes, and she had a dancing brown pelt that shined in the sun compared to Etwa's washed-out orange coat. Bit of a Mary Sue description, rolls eyes, says the author. Scrat decided to name the female Scrat-T. Scrat with a second T and an E. It fit, perhaps since he was lacking creativity at the moment, just trying to take in what a gorgeous squirrel she was. In the midst of the fight, the Scrat-T grabbed the nut from Etwa. She spread 2 folds of skin out from under her belly to glide to the nearest tree. Etwa growled and ran to catch up with her. Only then did the male squirrel come out of his daze. Now, both females were gone, and all he had was a look at his destroyed acorn tree. He screamed in horror when the memory the huge pachyderm filled his mind again. Not exactly how I think you spell pachyderm, but sure. In a mad dash, he sprinted faster than he had ever gone before to the two females and the walnut that had caused their conflict, squeaking and panting all the way. Whew. So it's tense. Okay, disclaimer. I do not own Ice Age, Scrat, or Scratsy, but I do own Etwa. Chapter 5, Stealing Earns Payback. This is the penultimate chapter, chat. This is the penultimate chapter. Are you excited? When Scrat arrived at Etwa's acorn tree, we didn't see the squabble he expected to see. Etwa was reasoning with Scratty instead of fighting. Though Scratty didn't talk, the tawnier female was full of words. She was not only talking about the acorn, but also about herself and an acorn tree Scratty could have. Scrat's eyes widened as his mouth opened in a wide, greedy smile. This was too good. A tree? Another acorn tree? Possibly one he could claim before Scratty finished the conversation with Etwa and claimed it for herself? The saber-toothed squirrel gasped when the saber-toothed squirrel gasped when the realization struck him. He laughed happily. Ha 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 ha. Internally congratulating himself for his new idea. With a quick motion of his legs that picked dust, he whooshed over to the tree Etwa was giving Scratty. But Scrat's dramatic display did not go unnoticed by the females. Scratty glanced at Etwa with uncertainty, for a moment which quickly transformed into anger when the thought of what the male squirrel was doing hit her. Etwa nodded, understanding where the other female was coming from. "After him!" Etwa yelled. The two took off after Scrat, Etwa by land and Scratty by air. Meanwhile, Scrat had arrived at the acorn tree. He grabbed 3 acorns in his paws, squeaking and squealing in delight. But suddenly, he smelled something in the air. Something wasn't quite right. He couldn't make it out. The male squirrel lifted his long snout to test the air again, but still he came up with nothing. The odor was fiery and smelled of acorns, but what it was, he still didn't have a clue. Again, Scrat sniffed. Still, nothing new. Scrat finally let out a yell of frustration and dropped all 3 nuts. They fell to the ground beside the tree with barely a sound. The hyperactive rodent quickly forgot about the nuts and how he had just dropped them. Scrat scrambled up to the top of the tree, story 3 tall tree, to get a whiff of the odor. But after 3 seconds of sniffing, a hard and furry object collided with him. Scrat screamed as he was hit on branches and hit his head repeatedly. Scrat caught an acorn during his fall. He was just about to hug it when his tail got snagged on a narrow space between 2 branches at the very bottom of the tree. The animal that hit Scrat turned out to be the dark chestnut-furred Scratty. She growled menacingly in Scrat's face, voicing her anger in a wordless rage for stealing her tree to be. Etwa just folded her arms, looking cross. Scratty snatched the acorn from her greedy saber-toothed counterpart and grinned smugly. Scrat squealed, squirmed, and yelped as he tried to free himself from the tree limbs, but it was no use. He was stuck. The females just stood there giggling. He shook a fist at the 2 girls, grunting and yelling gibberish. Without warning, Scratty hustled over the crevice where Scrat's tail was caught. She yanked it out with a hard pull. For a second, Scrat was relieved. That was until Scratty grabbed a hold of his tail and ran up the tree with him. She glided to another tree almost effortlessly, carrying Scrat by the tail. She arrived at an even higher tree. With a seductive grin on her face, she skillfully began to wedge Scrat's tail between a couple branches. Biomega, thank you. Thank you. Biomega, I missed you. I've missed you. And you come in at my worst moment. You come in as I'm doing this shit. Alright, where are we? God damn it. He panicked when he realized what she was doing. Scrat began to hyperventilate and shake his head frantically. But the wily female did not listen. She took her sweet time as the male squeaked and yelled in anxiety and pain. She eventually finished sticking his tail in there and gave him a good hard tug to make sure he was good and stuck. Then Scratsy walked to the edge of the branch, brushing her paws together with satisfaction. Scrat yelped as he realized she was about to leave. He extended a stretched paw to her, desperately hoping she would free him. But instead, she just expanded the folds of skin from her side and glided away. Yeah, long time no see. Sadly, we're not playing Divinity tonight. We're doing this dumb bullshit. So, okay, some context. So, last weekend I streamed this game called Scrat's Nutty Adventure, which came out this year. It's like this brand new Ice Age game that came out for no reason. And when I was streaming that game, I think with a total of 3 viewers, I was like the #1 Scrat streamer on Twitch. So I'm just trying to hold that title, you know? I'm just trying to hold that title. We did finish the game. We haven't platinumed it yet. But I want to hold my title as the #1 Scrat streamer on Twitch. So here we are reading fan fiction. All right, let's continue. Now he was again stuck in the tree, and this time without acorns. Things couldn't get any worse. Suddenly, lightning flashed in the distance, and rain poured down onto the tree and onto Scrat. It quickly soaked the squirrel's fur. Judging by the thick clouds and sudden, chilly wind, he predicted hail would also soon fall. The saber-toothed squirrel let out an anguished scream. Things could always get worse, at least for him. Now Scrat would not only have to escape from the huge tree, he'd have to wait for the horrendous downpour to end as well. And here's a note from the author. So that was a longer chapter. What do you think? Please R&R. I'm enjoying writing the story and could really use some feedback. Knob, welcome. Welcome to the #1 Scrat stream on Twitch again. So we have one more chapter of Love a Scrat. This is the final chapter. Yeah, see, final chapter. And chapter 6 is titled A Place to Call Home. I'm hoping it picks up again. I'm hoping it picks up. We had a little bit of horniness in like chapter 4. And we had like a moment of horniness in chapter 5. But we haven't gone full horny yet. So let's see what we get with this final chapter. Ooh, it's a long one too. It is a long one. All right, here we go. Scrat woke up with a startled squeak. He yawned and slowly rubbed his eyes. He hadn't known just how long he was sleeping. 1 hour, 2 hours? The squirrel suddenly gasped. It was morning. He had slept all night through the downpour, proven by his wet, matted coat. The sun was rising now and slowly drying his very damp fur. But then, another realization struck him. He was still stuck to that annoying tree by his tail. With an exasperated yell, Scrat jumped up and grabbed onto the nearest branch. He grunted, twisted, and turned as he tried to get his tail out. With a final heave, he freed himself. The saber-toothed squirrel grabbed his tail to check it for injury. But wait, he smelled something again. A nut? A squirrel? Etwa? Scrat raised his elongated snout high into the air, forgetting his tail. He sniffed the air loudly and deeply. He sniffed the air loudly and deeply. No sooner than he got a whiff of the acorn than something hard hit him in the nose. The object knocked him off the branch and set him crashing to the ground. The prehistoric squirrel groaned as he opened his eyes once more. But any shock and fatigue was immediately forgotten. There was an acorn by his side, the one that had hit him. Scrat twitched when he heard something running down the tree he was in before, and the animal that had made that noise was on the ground soon, smiling. It was Etwa. Hey, sorry about that. Nuts fall out of one's paws unexpectedly sometimes. You know that fight we had? The other girl and I forgive you for yesterday. We realized we were being too harsh with you. That acorn's our way of saying we're back on good terms, she said apologetically. Scrat squeaked and hugged his acorn. His mouth began to water at the thought of eating it. But I have more news than just about that acorn, she added, interrupting the male squirrel's thoughts. Scrat's eyes once more focused on her. You know that other girl, Chestnut? She likes you. She was just having a hissy fit yesterday. She wants to settle down with you, Etwa said with a smug look on her face. Scrat flinched and squeaked bewilderedly, as if to say, Huh? Who was Chestnut? Surely she meant Scratty. That girl, the one that can't talk like me. Her name is Chestnut, Etwa explained. She is quite fond of you. She also wants you to stay. And so do I. Scrat jerked in shock for a second, this time his jaw dropping. Scratty's real name was Chestnut, and how Etwa was she implying that she... Yes, I like you the way the other girl does. We've known each other since we were kids, in fact. We just got reacquainted. Talking is my squirrely gift, by the way. Anyway, I'll see you soon. Etwa began to scurry away, but she stopped abruptly. Oh, and don't forget, you still have that acorn tree to clean up. To clean up for us. She gestured to me that she wants to meet you there. She shouted back at him suggestively, as she gave him a wink. She grinned at him one last time before scampered away. Scrat gasped. The two girls were still letting him have that tree? And those acorns, they were probably still on the ground. But above all else, both girls liked him. Etwa and Chestnut. Scrat's heart skipped a beat. He didn't know whether to jump for joy, or turn into an anxiety-ridden mess. But it didn't matter. Scrat was thankful. He had an acorn by his side, an acorn tree, though badly damaged, and two females who might be his mates. In time, he knew that this would be a place he'd call home. Scrat promised himself that if he ever learned to speak, he'd tell Chestnut the name he had for her before. He'd tell her that his name for her was Scratty, just as fulfilling and beautiful as her real one was. And of course there was Etwa, wily and daring, yet kind. Not to mention her rare gift. Scrat knew that from that point forward, that nuts would never be his top priority again. It would be Etwa, Chestnut, and their family to come. But he knew, no matter how many years went by, that never forget that crazy day he met those two girls. And that's it. That's the finale of what is this fucking called? Love a Scrat. Love a Scrat. Okay. Let's go back. That was the first result that came up when we searched for Scrat fanfic. And it was a little spicy. However, I want to get spicier. I want to get, like, horny right now. Alright, what do we got? There's a lot of Scrat fanfiction. I feel like Scrat's happy ending. Oh no, this is family and friendship. This is not what we want. Chat, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but we have to do it. Erotic Scrat fanfiction. Suck my fic. Man, nothing's coming up. Okay. Nothing is coming up. We did not close it up? What do you mean? What did I not close up? We did not close it up. What did I not close up? We wrapped up that Scrat fanfic. The first one. Now we're looking for something semi-erotic. Okay, here we go. Scrat's most nuttiest time adventure. Chapter 1. Ice Age. 20,000 years ago, 1 month after the events of Sailor Moon's Ice Age adventure. Even though the desolate land of ice and snow was, well, desolate, it was actually quite beautiful with snowflakes gently falling from the sky. The sky was pretty. The snow-covered fields were gorgeous, and there were a few shapes of ice that added to the scenery. Yet it wasn't that peaceful because our nut-obsessed squirrel named Scrat was once again chasing his acorn that rolled away from him as he chased after it down a steep, snowy hill. He desperately wanted it back. "Come back, acorn!" he yelled, and screamed when he lost his footing and rolled down the hill. Both he and his nut became snowballs as they rolled out of control into a small cave tunnel, rolling all around until reaching the exit where they rolled up on an ice slope and finally came to a stop, making a snow nut in the process. "Oomph!" he grunted before digging himself out and happily hugged his prized possession. The story ended, didn't really conclude. I mean, I don't write the stories, I just read them. This is not a dramatic writing of Scrat fanfic. It's a dramatic reading. That was it. That was the end of chapter 6. Scrat was looking forward to hanging out with his honeys. All right. He looked and saw the strangest herd in history approach. Uh-oh, acorn nabbers. Scrat knew he had to hide quickly. So the little squirrel quickly hid behind a rock that was covered in snow, just as the 3 friends of the herd, Manny, the mammoth, Sid, the sloth, and Diego, the saber-tooth, were walking past, unaware of Scrat's presence, and their conversation on anything but a simple little acorn. "Just imagine, a water park made of melting ice. There'd be swimming pools, slides, and even spots to get a tan. Hey, maybe I can open up a camp," Sid was blabbering, much to Manny and Diego's annoyance. "Sid, you're not qualified to run a camp," Manny told him firmly. A pause. Well, maybe we can run into Sailor Moon and her herd there. They're explorers, right?" Sid suggested, shrugging while Scrat risked a peek and saw that the 3 other animals were still oblivious of his presence. He'd seen them before. They were the same animals along with the other 6 unusual ones that asked him about the whereabouts of humans. If he also remembered that sloth, who tried to steal his acorn days earlier, was holding an adorable human baby, which Scrat had never seen up close before. "Like that'll ever happen," Diego scoffed. If only they knew that's what will happen in the near future, and that their future is to be much more unexpected. Anyway, once Scrat was certain that they would not come after him or his nut, as he sighed in relief, he made his way in the opposite direction. That was close. Now he can return to his original agenda, like finding a place to bury his nut, and then come back later to eat it. Scrat sniffed around looking for a perfect spot, without things going wrong. But, as he passed a small ice canyon, which was large to him due to him being one of the smallest creatures on Earth, a very unusual ping sound was heard behind him. "Ee?" Scrat muttered, and turned around and saw something glow green within the snow. What in the world is that? He wondered. He got closer, but got a fright when it glowed brighter. Scared, he took cover behind another lump of snow, afraid that it was some kind of monster. When nothing happened, Scrat nervously peered up and, just to make sure, tossed a tiny piece of ice onto where the green light shined. Nothing happened, apart from the strange noise. Whatever this thing was, Scrat felt the need to investigate. So gently putting down his acorn, as though telling it to stay there, Scrat dug into the snow until he climbed into the newly made hole. What he pulled out and placed onto the snow was the most unusual thing he had ever seen. It looked like a rock, but it didn't feel like one. Little did Scrat know, it was a handheld time machine. It had many buttons, including a circular one, a small screen, and a tiny clock, which, now alive once again due to the presence of life, activated. There it read, once it finished analyzing its current whereabouts, was May 26, 20,000 BC, 4:30 p.m. Huh? Scrat muttered, dumbfounded of the unusual, whatever this thing was, especially since, being born in the Ice Age, he had no clue about this thing. Also unaware to him was that the original owner and creator of this device was also buried under the ice. A human scientist from the future who had a gunshot to where his heart was and had unfortunately traveled to the wrong year to recover, and instead not only died from his wounds, but also froze to death. All that remained of the man now was a skeleton, his hair and clothes. What had happened to him will forever be a mystery. Well, we just found out what happened to him. He died from a gunshot wound. Okay. Sorry, had to interject just a little bit. Scrat wondered what the strange rock was and sniffed at it to see if it would glow green again. But then he accidentally pushed the circular button, which suddenly made the machine act up. Startled and leaning back, Scrat saw that it spun a little spinning thing on top of its head, glowing green, and then, in a slightly blinding light, it made a jolt of electricity that forced Scrat to shield his eyes with his paws. But when he looked again, as the flash was gone, to his horror, his acorn was gone. It disappeared when it was zapped by the time machine, taken to wherever and whenever. "Ah!" screamed Scrat in horror, immediately losing it. His precious acorn was gone. Suddenly realizing that this thing was an acorn snatcher, Scrat glared at it. "Hey, give me back the acorn right now!" Scrat grabbed the machine and angrily shook it to try and get the acorn out of it, as he thought it ate it, only to accidentally activate it again, and this time he was zapped along with the machine, and he jolted slightly when disappearing himself. Taken to another time. Okay. Chat, I'm going to take a quick restroom break, and then we're going to continue with Scrat's time travels. I will be right back. Okay. We're back. We're back for more of this shit. Alright. Time traveling Scrat. This is a long one. Scrat goes to a lot of places. I don't know if we're gonna get through all this. I want, like, I'll be honest, like, I'm ready to get a little horny here. This fanfiction is not quite horny enough for me. So hopefully that will be corrected soon. Okay. Where are we? Middle Ages, 1250 AD. In the kingdom of Camelot, the acorn, taken into the future, reappeared while breaking a small rock that held up a larger one, and took its place in holding it up. A few seconds later, Scrat appeared with the machine, which he was still trying to beat up after he realized that he couldn't feel the nice temperatures, or even the snow anymore. It was warm. Stopping at what he was doing, Scrat looked around at his new surroundings, and realized that he was taken somewhere else. Huh? Where was he? Where'd all the snow go? As he looked, Scrat then saw, to his delight, was his acorn. He happily approached it, putting down the time machine that took him unknowingly into a future long after his time. But as he pulled at his acorn, to his frustration, it was stuck. No matter how hard he pulled his prize or tried to heave the heavy but normal rock, Scrat was too small and landed onto the ground. He needed something that yanked the acorn out. Something long, pointy, and strong, very strong. A glimmer of light shined, which had Scrat shield his eyes again. But when he looked to see what it was, he gasped. He gaped in amazement, as there before him was, unknown to him, as it was very new to him since the Ice Age was much older than what he was seeing, the legendary Excalibur, the sword in the stone. Oh, Scrab murmured, admiring the very pretty-looking sword, its golden hilt with jewels, and its silver-white shiny blade. Though he thought of something and glanced back at his acorn, that thing was big and possibly long enough and strong enough to get his prize free. Aha! He perked up at the idea. Perfect! Scrat then scurried up to the sword in the stone, and surprisingly, despite not being King Arthur or even a human, Scrat pulled and almost instantly yanked the sword free and held it up in victory like a true chosen one. How can he not do that when he's not even related to Arthur? I have no idea. It's a note from the author. But this victory was crushed when Scrat suddenly saw, to his great worry, a group of archers who had somehow saw this coming. Who had somehow saw this come running and held out bows and arrows. Uh-oh, humans. Lots of them, and strangely dressed too. And even more surprising, they could talk. Though Scrat couldn't understand what they were saying, but he can tell at least by their expressions. They were not happy. Ducking to avoid arrows being shot at him, Scrat tumbled backwards while trying to avoid the deadly weapons, due to the sword being very heavy for him. He panicked before managing to block one arrow and, with surprise, defense, and a bit of strength, as he quickly got the hang of wielding the blade, blocked more. As he was doing this, Scrat inadvertently whacked his acorn out from between the two rocks, when he noticed for a split second, before the larger rock landed right on top of his part of his tail, hard. Ah! He screamed in pain after dropping the sword, before yanking his tail free and went straight to his acorn and hugged it happily. But then another arrow almost sliced him in half. Scrat felt his heart freeze and now saw that the archers looked even more angry than before. They were furious, very likely due to his main reason for wielding such a powerful sword just to get a simple little acorn. Seeing hundreds more coming at him rapidly, Scrat picked up running. Scrat panicked before running to pick up the time machine, as he suddenly knew it was his only way to get back home, and then ran as fast as he could, screaming while avoiding the arrows that were hot on his trail. Climbing up a stone wall, Scrat found a hole and hidden himself inside, cringing as the arrows missed up. Before he slumped inside in relief, safe. Or not, because he heard a hissing sound and realized he picked the wrong place to hide, because he hidden himself inside the barrel of a cannon. Did they have fucking cannons in Camelot? Which was lit up and shot him right out of the air and sent him flying while screaming. Looking ahead, Scrat screamed in panic as more arrows were coming his way. He needed to get out of there fast. Remembering how he'd gotten himself into this mess, Scrat fiddled with the buttons until it zapped his acorn again, which disappeared to another time. Okay, his acorn was safe. Now he had to get himself to where it was. But the closer Scrat got to the arrows, the more he knew he was about to die. And he couldn't get the machine to zap him quickly enough. Screaming in horror, Scrat was about to meet his end, when just in time the time machine triggered and zapped him and itself, just missing the arrows by an inch. And now we move to ancient Rome. Man, it's hard to tell stories like this. It is hard to tell stories like this. Being a voice actor is hard. My throat's like fucking seizing up already. Okay. I'm also tired as shit. It's a long day today. And I didn't go to bed until like 1 a.m. last night. So it's been an experience. All right. Sorry. Okay. Ancient Rome. So short one. Reappearing in the middle of the air, Scrat hit the ground in a short fall, but felt long to him. Ow! He cried out while coming to a stop on the dirt ground. Dazed at first and relieved to still be alive, Scrat stood up and looked around another new place. He had no idea where he was, but something was clearly happening. He landed himself into a coliseum during a tournament, as the opening ceremony was taking place and the crowds of the Romans were cheering. As the small Ice Age animal was marveling this, he spotted his prize close by. Hooray! Scrat hurried to reach it, only to be knocked and run into by a horse-drawn chariot, which made him lose his grip on the machine, which rested next to his acorn. He painfully rolled under the cart until his tail got caught, and was now being dragged along with it. Scrat hopped twice to try and pull his tail off, but then, as he held onto it, he suddenly found himself enjoying the ride. Hey, this is actually fun, Scrat thought to himself as he began to laugh, only to bash his crotch right into a rock which freed him from the chariot, but the impact was quite painful. Ouch. Dazed at first, Scrat then once again saw his acorn and picked it up. hugging it lovingly like a teddy bear. Oh, sweet little nut. How he missed you so much. He then heard the fanfare and wondered what was going on, only to smile when he thought, maybe this was the victory music and everybody was impressed of his determination. Well, this was exciting. He waved to the crowd and proudly presented his prize in his paw like a champion, unaware that this was only just the start of the games, as the gates slowly creaked open right behind him. Until Scrat heard a roar which made him freeze and soon realized the truth. The grammar, dude. The grammar. Nervously turning to see, his heart once again skipped a beat and fear seeped throughout his body. While he wasn't aware of what kind of animal that thing was, as it was a lion, he knew that it was a carnivore, and it was hungry. Oh no! Quivering in fear, Scrat picked up the time machine and quickly fiddled with the buttons while whimpering in fear, pleading for the thing to work and save him and his acorn again. Just as the lion charged straight at him. Ah! Screamed Scrat in horror, just as he was about to be eaten, when he, the acorn, and the time machine all disappeared just in time. Oh my god. Okay. This is now question mark timeline. Ah! Scrat muffled a scream as he and the two items reappeared underneath the snow. Digging himself out, he looked around to see where he now was. The air felt chilly and familiar, and the surroundings was matched it. I'm just reading it how it is, chat. I'm just reading it how it is. To his relief and happiness, it was indeed snow. Ah, phew. Scrat sighed in relief. He was home. He lay down into the snow, hugging and kissing the ground. Home, sweet home. Or maybe not? Hearing another sound, Scrat nervously looked behind him and saw a giant metal ship coming straight towards him, with the ship's horn blaring, crushing into the ice as it went, which meant that Scrat was not home at all. North Atlantic, April 14th, year 1912. It was the Titanic. Just as it was about to be destroyed, and it was about to crash not only into its doom, but also into Scrat. Ah, he screamed, picking up his nut and the time machine and made a run for it, but realized too late that he was cornered onto the iceberg that was far too big for the ship to simply get past. Scrat screamed before being pressed right between the ship, which forced it to stop and slowly began to cause it to sink, and the iceberg that won this battle. A hole shaped like Scrat opened up, and the squirrel himself, dazed at being slightly squashed, fell forward while the machine, due to impact, activated again and zapping him, and the acorn to yet another time. Whew, man. Junior high school, Neo Tokyo. Oh my god. Year 1996. During the episode Secret Garden of Sailor Moon Season 2. Serena, Amy, and Lita were screaming as this little green twig thing was moving on its own like an alien worm, which terrified the three teenagers at the school. This is really weird, Amy exclaimed in horror as Serena whimpered, terrified of what she and her friends were seeing. One thing she did figure out, it must have come from Alan's science project he had in his room, whatever that was. It's so gross and creepy. I can't believe it was my hair, Serena shrieked, scratching at the top of her head, only to shriek louder when Scrat, the time machine, and the acorn materialized and landed onto the ground in front of her. Amy and Lita shrieked louder themselves at the unexpected appearance, while Scrat, recovering from his unexpected incident, looked up and saw, to his dismay, more humans over him. But as he gazed at Serena, Scrat blinked and realized that she looked extremely familiar, as the image of Sailor Moon appeared in the girl's place briefly before vanishing. Huh? Isn't she the same strange blonde-haired new creature that was with the other 8 guys? She looked a bit younger, but Scrat was certain it was the same person. Oh, great. Another Cardian, Lita grumbled in dismay, while Serena quickly hid behind the taller teenager in fright. Scrat cringed before noticing a very unusual twig and blinked. But then the twig, really coming from the Doom Tree, wriggled and squirmed towards him and the acorn. He screamed in horror at the monster and quickly fiddled with the time machine again and screamed louder when it neared him. Thankfully, the machine triggered again and whisked him, his nut, and itself away, and disappearing, much to the 3 Sailor Scouts' confusion. Maybe it wasn't a Cardian? Amy theorized. Looked more like a part rat, part squirrel, if you ask me, Serena remarked, blinking, especially when it had an acorn. Little did Serena know that she would be seeing Scrat again, yet when the time came, it would be his first time in meeting her as Sailor Moon in a little over 2 years to come, in her case anyway. Okay, I'm done with this one. This one goes on forever. So we're going to try and find... one more to read. And chat, like, I want to find something horny. I want to find, like, an erotic Scrat fanfiction. It is essential to me. But when I search for erotic Scrat fanfiction, nothing comes up. Okay. We got 2 options here. Hurt, comfort, romance. All right, here we go. Wild and Nuts. This is the story of an interspecific couple. Here we go. Now we're talking. It was nighttime, and in the darkest part of the woods in the dino world, there is a female saber-toothed flying squirrel named Scratty lying on the tree branch in a melancholic state, holding the acorn that Scrat had unfortunately dropped in the underground world. A while back, she fell in love with him, but he was only ever obsessed over the acorn other than her. Just thinking about it makes her even more upset than before, and the female glares at the acorn in anger, but calms down as she's grateful to have the nut. A moment afterwards, the female rodent decides to bury the nut as she jumps and glides out of the branch, with the object in tow. While looking for a good place to bury the nut, until an albino Barinox named Rudy shows up and spots the tiny saber-toothed flying squirrel, who stares at the giant dino with great fear and horror as the brute growls at her. Scratty shivered in terror and quickly bolted from the dino, who then gave chase to the frightened mammal. Rudy opened his jaws to snap at the saber-toothed flying squirrel, only to miss as the latter dodges his bites while fleeing for her life. The chase lasted for a few minutes until the squirrel came to a dead end and backed into the wall as the Barinox nears her. Rudy grins evilly as the rodent starts to cry as the dino licks his chops, while the female clutches the acorn tightly and closes her eyes as tears fall from the face and braces her fate. The albino opens his drooling maw, and before he takes a bite, a screaming brown blur swoops down and snatches the squirrel away. The dino's jaws, as he narrowly misses his meal. This is like I'm having issues reading this with the grammar. The blur reveals himself to be his long-standing enemy, Buck, swinging on the vine with Scratty in tow. And Rudy looks and angrily growls at the weasel that took away his meal and swung away laughing at his arch-rival's sake. "Sorry, Snowflake, this lass is off the menu," Buck bellowed at the albino as he swings away scot-free as the dino roars in anger. After escaping Rudy, Buck lands on a branch with Scratty in tow and sees that she fainted from shock and terror. The weasel carefully climbs down the tree while holding the flying squirrel in one arm and lands safely on the ground to carry the female away deeper into the woods. A few minutes later, I'm just going to call it Scrat. Like, fuck Scratty. Female Scrat. This is just going to be Buck and Scrat. A few minutes later, Scrat wakes up in a daze in a well-made campsite and focuses his vision to stare at the brown figure talking to a dino cell. "What do you mean she might be in trouble? You worry too bloody much." But his Buck caught his argument short when he sees the squirrel waking up. "Oi, hello there, lass." The weasel greeted her. The saber-toothed flying squirrel's vision cleared to see the one-eyed weasel talking to her, and she looks around frantically for something. "Ace there, lass. You're safe from old Rudy." The weasel reassured her a little. Scrat looked at the weasel in bewilderment and backs away from him. "All right. Pardon me manners, lass. The name's Buck. Short for Buckminster. Long for Buh," he introduced himself. The flying squirrel nodded at his name, but kept his distance due to the skull on the mustachide's foot. "Mind telling me your name, then?" he asked, but he only gets grunts and chirps from him. "Not much of a talker, eh?" he asked once more, only to get a nod from him. Buck ponders about how to help her communicate and gets an idea with a smirk. "Why don't we try charades? You like that?" the weasel suggested, and the saber-toothed flying squirrel replied with a nod. "Alrighty, lass, you're first," he replied. Scrat... Okay, this gets interesting. We'll keep going. Digging, he guessed, but received a head shake, meaning no, and started to scratch the rock wall. "She's scratching yo one-eyed cretin," the skull spoke about the rodent's actions and got a disapproving nod from her. "Oi, who asked you?" Buck retorts to the skull and sees the female pointing to her tail for the next hint. "Your tail now," he asked once more, getting happy chirps from Scrat, and then scratches the wall again and held her arm to motion a chopped emphasis. "Cutting your arm? No. Scratching? But..." He seems to make the chop motion. "It's Scrat." He cuts him off with a grunt and points to his tail and clasps his hands together. "Scrat tail?" He motions another chop at the end of the word. Now it sounds like Scratty. Yeah, this like doesn't work when it's not. Oh my god. Okay. I think I've reached my... Wait. No, chat. This kid... I was about to get up, but I saw some words, and this gets good. Alright, Scratty and Buck. Whew, buddy. "Took you long enough," the skull said to the weasel, who then kicks the ladder off of his toes. "That's enough out of ya. Sorry about that, lass. He's a friendly chap, mind you," Buck said as he walks up to the female flying squirrel, who backs in terror. "Easy, I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to return this." The male reassures her and brings his tail around, holding up an acorn. Scratty quickly reclaims her nut and nuzzles it affectionately. "You dropped it when I saved you from Snowflake. Also, I'm guessing you're from the surface, am I right?" he asked as the rodent, and she nodded in sadness. "Relax, Scratty, my dear. I'll protect you until you're ready to leave for the surface. He reassured as once more he held out his hand to her. The female squirrel drops the acorn and quickly hugs the weasel, and the latter did the same as he strokes her head. Later next week, Scratty and Buck spent most of their time traveling throughout the dino world and enjoyed most of the scenery. Despite the weasel's eccentric and wild demeanor, the saber-toothed flying squirrel began to trust him a little bit and started being friends with him. On occasion, she keeps trailing off the path she walks with Buck and almost got ensnared by a plant, only to get saved by the mustelid. She thanks and hugs him in return for saving her from other dangers in the forest. The weasel decided to keep a close watch on his female companion as he walks near a giant moth and shoos it away, only to reveal some trees filled with a variety of nuts, much to Scratty's joy. This picks up. Chat, I promise this goes places. I saw some words and this goes places. Several months later, in the evening hours, Scratty began to trust Buck even more despite his wild and crazy nature. The mammals began to become close to one another, to the point of being lovers, and their tree home is wonderfully decorated, and it has a campsite outside along with it. Scratty was relaxing in a hammock as Buck returns with a few bouquets of flowers he had found on his adventures, much to the female squirrel's love and joy. Scratty, I was glad to have found you. Otherwise, you would have been Rudy's dinner. I don't know what the accent is. The accent is all over the place. I apologize. I'm really tired. It's gonna be what it's gonna be. Buck started as he sat the bouquets on his makeshift love seat. You're the most beautiful mammal I've ever met, he said as he hugs and parts from the embrace. Scratty did some more sign language she learned over the months, and Buck caught wind of her gestures. Thanks. I'm your handsome savior. And don't worry, we'll find some place to bury your nut, the weasel said as he turned to walk out of the tree home. Just you relax. Dinner will be ready soon, he said as he left the female saber-toothed flying squirrel alone. The female squirrel smiles happily at the weasel that left and stares at the acorn she kept and was reminded about a certain saber-toothed rodent she once knew. She shakes the image of him out of her head and picks the flower from one of the bouquet the one-eyed mustelid brought and lies back in the hammock to fiddle with it to ease her mind and heart. Later that night, Buck and Scratty finish dinner and are sitting by the campfire relaxing as the weasel has Scratty under his arms. Quite the lovely night, isn't it? Buck asked, but received a solemn nod from her as she sighs in sadness. Why the long face? Is it about your ex-hubby? The weasel asked once more. Scratty nods with a forlorn expression as tears leaks from her eyes. Easy. No tears, girl. Did I ever tell you I was married to a pineapple? The weasel asked, reassuring the female rodent, who shook her head no in surprise, yet a wild expression on her face. Well, I was being cheated on when I found out that she was sleeping with a broccoli. The weasel gags at mentioning the vegetable. But she was an ugly pineapple, but the broccoli was uglier. The weasel laughed as the saber-toothed flying squirrel joined in while being cheered up. I'm reading this as is, I promise. Both mammals stop their laughs and relaxes against each other. But don't worry, though. I hope to find someone beautiful, as I will find someone, as will someone find handsome to admire. The weasel replied as the female nodded at him. Buck and Scratty started to gaze at each other affectionately and started to romantically kiss each other as their tongues wrestled in their mouths. While making out, Scratty reached down to grab the weasel's sheath and ball massages, much to the one-eyed weasel's surprise, as he blushes from the caressing touch. The male's cock came out fully erect as both mammals parted lips and smiled at one another now that Buck's cock was fully exposed. Let's have some fun, shall we, love? Watch those saber teeth, though. Buck warned and leans back. Scratty grin. Scratty grins and licks her lover's cock. Scratty grins and licks her lover's cock, earning a pleasant grunt from the weasel, and then wraps her lips around his junk and starts giving him a well-deserved blowjob. Buck moans in pleasure as he holds onto the female rodent's head and tightly curls his toes as she sucks on his boner. A little later, as the female flying squirrel deep-throats his cock, Buck comes in the female's mouth, and she swallows it, indulging in the warm, salty of the weasel's cum. Scratty releases her mouth from her lover's cock and gazes lovingly at him. You had your fun now. You had your fun, and now it's my turn, love, the weasel said, as he turned up to his saber-toothed flying squirrel's face. On your back, lass, he growled in a lustful manner which got the female shivering in ecstasy as she lies on her back and spread her legs wide, exposing her pussy to the lusty weasel. Buck licks his lips and leans in to lick the female's pussy, earning a pleasant moan as he eats her out. Scratty blushes deeply and clenches her teeth as the weasel shoves his tongue in deep, licking her walls a little before stopping. Delicious, Buck says as he licks his lips off the flying squirrel's juices. The weasel looms over the saber-toothed flying squirrel, positioning his cock at her entrance, and sees the rodent nodding, saying that she wants it. Buck complied and jams his rod inside the female, making her scream loudly in pleasure, as the weasel starts thrusting inside his lover in a missionary position. As her grip her hands with his, the weasel groans in his mind of how tight the rodent's pussy is, and Scratty moans from the thrusts as the weasel plows her vagina hard, feeling his balls hitting her rump. Buck starts to fuck the squirrel faster and harder as the female wraps her legs around his hips and curls her toes while the weasel plows the saber-toothed squirrel relentlessly. So good. Yes, Buck said between grunts. Oh, yes, I feel it. The weasel grunted some more while close to his orgasm. Scratty intertwines her tail around Buck as she screams, nearing her orgasm ass also. Oh, here it comes. Ah! Buck bellowed as he gave one final thrust and comes deeply inside the rodent's pussy. Scratty whimpered as she grits her teeth while her womb is being flooded with the Dino Whisperer's warm, sticky seed. After the climax slows to a stop, Buck pants as he pulled out of his lover and rolled off of Scratty and onto the floor, lying beside the female, exhausted from the sex, as the latter releases her tail from his. The couple look at each other with a cheeky smirk. Want to go for round 2, love? But this time, anally? The weasel asked, eager to go in again. The female saber-toothed flying squirrel responded by getting up on all fours with her tail exposed, with her tail up, exposing her pucker to the adventurous weasel. Buck grins and got up with his cock still erect, walks over to lick the rodent's pucker, a little earning a slight moan. After a few licks, the weasel kneels and shoves his member deep inside her ass, earning more loud moans from Scratty as he grips her waist tightly. Buck decides to fuck even faster inside the female as he grits his teeth while adventurously dominating his mistress, and the latter grips at the ground while the weasel plows her anus hard. The weasel nears his second climax as he closes his eyes while going even faster as the female flying squirrel screams in sheer ecstasy as she feels her weasel's lover's balls hitting her ass again. Buck, hanging his tongue out, and shoves his cock deep inside and comes again while curling his toes. Scratty whimpered, curls her toes also as she feels the one-eyed weasel's cum flowing her tail hole this time. After finishing pumping his seed inside the flying squirrel, the weasel pulled out and lies next to his lover. "Well, that was bloody fantastic. Won't you agree, lass?" Bucky asked in breaths. Scratty nodded a yes and started to see Buck as a better love interest than Scrat. At least, unlike him, he wouldn't choose an acorn over her. Hence, he's not a squirrel. Not only the weasel is bonkers but adventurous, daring and handsome, and she loves like that. The weasel helps Scratty and Buck, motions to her messy fur, but she doesn't care about messy her fur is, and decided to call it a night with him. The couple went back inside the tree and inside the hammock as both mammals slept together peacefully as more adventures await them tomorrow. That is what I was looking for. That was what I was looking for tonight, chat. That was perfect. Chat. I'm aroused. I'm aroused now, chat. I am aroused. Okay. So that has been an hour and a half of Scrat fanfic. I think that's as much as I can... I think that's the most I can get out of this bit. I think that is the absolute most that I can get out of this bit. So, thank you. Thank you for joining me. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter, at SuperHypeGaming. My Twitter account is the best content that I put out. And don't forget that tomorrow at 8:30 p.m., I will be live streaming the Game Awards, hoping for Dante to be in Smash. And I hope you enjoyed this erotic Scrat fanfic. Maybe we'll do more of this. It was fun. And until next time, have a good night, guys.